Ladies and gentlemen, my apologies for the technical difficulties we faced initially, but we have now heard from brave Fatima, and I will be opening our forum. Before we begin with the forum, allow me to give you a short introduction of our moderator, Datuk Dr. Ahmad Farouk Musa, who is a founder and director at the Islamic Renaissance Front, an intellectual think tank promoting reform and renewal, democracy, good governance, and human rights. He is also a former director at the Center for Combating Corruption and Cronyism, C4, and a former deputy chairperson of Bersih 2.0, which is a civil movement working for free and fair elections. He is a commissioner at the Commonwealth Initiative for Freedom of Religion or Belief based in Westminster, London, and currently an academic researcher at the School of Medicine, Monash University, Malaysia, and a trained cardiothoracic surgeon. Datuk Farouk, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jasmine. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Your Excellencies, Chief of Missions, Ambassadors, Datuk-Datuk, Tan Sri, Professors, Lecturers, friends and colleagues, welcome to this symposium, which is a joint collaboration between 10 organizations, and IRF, which I headed, is one of the coalition members. And Tan Sri Azali is coming in now. And I think all of you have read about our write-up on the Eventbrite. There's no need for me to go to details of the displacements of people, or how many millions or how many thousands have been killed, and how many other 100,000s were malnourished, children who were malnourished and died every day. But it suffices to say, I think, that the Yemeni crisis is one of the worst humanitarian crises in the world, right? And that has been acknowledged by United Nations themselves. The thing is that, some of you might come here with an idea what this symposium is all about. Some of you might want to see a more neutral stand. Some of you might have their own ideas behind what caused the war in Yemen. And we have with us the ambassador, the Yemeni ambassador, Dr. Adil over here, and Bahamid over here, and he's going to give a 5 minutes short talk on his views about what's happening in Yemen. And that's despite the what they call sharing by our academics and our experts over here, right? I'll introduce one by one of them to you. But I want to say that, when I woke up early this morning, the first thing I did, like most of you, I believe so, was to check my phone for any messages, right? So there was this message from a friend of mine, who is the head of Joseph Cobell School of International Studies. He's a head of Middle East Studies at the Joseph Cobell School of International Studies, University of Denver, Dr. Nadir Hashemi from the US. So he sent a message last night, because of this time difference. So early in the morning, the first thing I read was this news on Newsweek about Prince Mohammed bin Salman visit to China, right? When he basically say it's the right thing for China to have concentration camps against the Uyghurs, right? And we have heard recently about what happened in Pakistan, how he pledged 20 billion fund to Pakistan, investment to Pakistan, and of course he cancelled his visit to KL for whatever reason we don't know, but probably one of the reasons might be because of this symposium as well. Some people say, yeah, not me. All right. What I'm trying to say now is that, we have this, what do you call, I leave it to Prof. Chandra to explain further, but we have heard about the death, the brutal death of Jamal Khashoggi, and the military bombings of the coalitions headed by Saudi Arabia against the Yemenis. Last night, Dr. James, he was with me, and he was saying that one of the reasons that caused for this civilians casualties among the Yemenis were the imprecise bombing of the Saudi airplanes, right? So that has caused this misery among the Yemeni people. And like what was mentioned by our foreign minister this morning, was that we don't know actually why Malaysia got involved in this, why Malaysia was involved in this attack or whatever coalition against the Yemeni people. Even though some might say that it's for humanitarian aid to bring back Malaysian students, but many would doubt whether it was the real reason for the Malaysian military to be present in Yemen or in Saudi Arabia. So the thing now is that we have to ask ourselves, what can we do to alleviate this? And Global Peace Malaysia had done a very good job in trying to raise awareness and to get people to donate. And I hope that all of you would be kind enough to donate to Global Peace Malaysia in the effort to help the Yemenis. The thing is that I think the main issue with our Malaysian psyche is that we feel, although you have seen the video just now that says that it's not about Sunni and Shiite conflicts, right? It's not about that. But sad to say that there are still Malay Muslims over here who believe that they felt strongly when there was a catastrophe in Syria. Because why? Because the regime of Bashar al-Assad is basically a Shiite regime, and the civilians were Sunni Muslims, right? But they were silent when it happened in Yemen. Why? Because the majority of the Yemenis are Shiites, and because the perpetrators were Sunni, led by Saudi Arabia. So I believe somehow or rather, because of this problem in our psyche, that we cannot see beyond the religious divide. We cannot see beyond it. We are still seeing it as a conflict between Sunni and Shiites. And that's a real problem that we are facing nowadays. Unless we can break down this divide and look at the humanitarian crisis as Muslim as brothers, whether they're Sunnis or whether they're Shiites, they're still brothers. They are still brothers in Islam, right? Unless we have that kind of belief, I think we would be able to see this as a humanitarian crisis than anything else. Over here we have 4 panelists, Dr. Mamari, Abdul Rahman al-Mamari, our minister at the Prime Minister Department of Religious Affairs, Dr. Mujahid Yusuf Rawa, my long-term friend from Penang, came from the same school, Penang Free School, and Dr. James Dorsey from NTU, and of course our renowned intellectual, Professor Chandra Muzaffar of JUST. And I think in the interest of time, I would like to invite Dr. Abdul Rahman al-Mamari, who has a PhD in post-colonial literature from the National University of Malaysia, UKM, and currently a researcher and freelance translator. And he's assisting with the Tangible Association for Yemeni Refugees, TAIR, which is an NGO registered under the UNHCR and based in Negeri Sembilan. I'll give the floor to you.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. His Excellency Dato Saifuddin Abdullah, Foreign Minister of Malaysia, His Excellency Dato Siri, Dr. Mujahid Yusuf Rawa, the Minister at the Prime Minister Office for Religious Affairs, Tan Sri Dato Zulkifli Abdul Razak, Rector of the International Islamic University, Malaysia, Tan Sri Razal Ismail, Chairman of Sohakam, His Excellency Dr. Adil Bahamid, Ambassador of the Republic of Yemen, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you very much for having me here with you in this symposium. I'd like to thank Stand with Yemen Coalition for arranging such event to highlight the Yemeni crisis and plight. I also thank all of you who take this journey this morning to come and to hear and to listen to the story of the crisis of Yemen. I prepared some slides I want to share with you. I think if it's ready there. Okay, thank you. This is for the Yemeni refugees in Malaysia. At the beginning, just some facts. We can talk that Yemen consists of 29 millions population, consists of 21 governorates, and the area is about 5,000 plus kilometer square. Next. Before we go straight to my main topic about the refugees in Malaysia, and in line with the objectives of this symposium to create an awareness of the real causes of what is happening in Yemen, I will take you shortly for a brief background of what happened in the last 7 or 8 years, because actually the war, the crisis didn't happen just 4 years ago. Maybe the story starts in 2011. We can go. This starts in February 2011, in light with what's called for the Arab Spring at that time, when the youth went out. You can go for next slide, please. Yes. Before this, please. Yeah. When the youth peaceful revolution broke out in 2011, this one really shook the regime at that time, but unfortunately the revolution couldn't stop or couldn't force the regime at that time to step down. This what makes the Gulf countries, or GCC, the Council of Gulf Countries, to be involved with what's called GCC initiative. Next, please. Which take about 6 or 7 months of negotiation until they signed the Gulf Initiative in November 2011. Next. According to this initiative, the ex-president Saleh forced to step down and to hand over the presidency to his deputy. And then in February 2012, we got the new or the first election after the revolution. Next. Then the ex-president, he handed over the power to the new president, Hadi. Next, please. According to the initiative, one of the points of the initiative which was very good to build a future after the revolution, what's called the National Dialogue Conference, when they call all the factors of all the political actors to be involved in national dialogue to discuss all the aspects or all the problems that they are facing, and to put all the solutions on table. This one, it takes about 1 year until the National Dialogue Conference comes with the outcomes of the National Conference dialogue, which address the majority of the problems of Yemen. And by 2014, actually, according to the international community, Yemen was referred as one of the success stories of the Arab Spring at that time. Next. But unfortunately, just a few months after the outcome or the conclusion of the National Conference dialogue, what happened that some groups of the Houthis, they attacked and controlled the capital of Sana'a. Next. Then, just after a few months, the Houthis, they controlled also the presidential palace, and also the president himself was put under the house arrest. Next, please. But maybe in 1 month, the president, he managed to escape and to flee the capital and to go to the second capital of Yemen, which is the Aden at the south. Unfortunately, he was attacked and chased by the aeroplanes, which tried to assassinate him at that time. Next, please. Then, after that, the Arab coalition, the Saudi, Emirates, and all these countries, they came to interfere in the Yemeni scene. So actually, this is like just historical background to what is happening now. Next, please. Yeah. Then, since 2015, and according to this war between this coalition and the Houthis in Yemen, we witnessed so many consequences. Here we have that we can highlight the current health and humanitarian situation. I think most of the speakers, they highlight these issues about the millions of people, of Yemeni peoples who are in dire need of the humanitarian aids. The displaced people, those in need of the health care, and this is all according to the international organizations. Next, please. And unfortunately, cholera outbreak, which was the worst cholera outbreak in the world. Next. For the education sector was affected badly with this war, and according to the UNICEF representative in Yemen, she said, I quote, "An entire generation of children in Yemen faces a bleak future because of limited or no access to education." So actually, this war doesn't destroy our present, but also they destroy the future of Yemen. Next, please. Also, from the consequences of this war, we have the displacement crisis. We can categorize into internally and externally. Internally is about 2.9 million, and externally is like, this is just estimate number, 180,000. And it's very difficult to calculate and to get accurate number because the Yemenis, they scattered in so many different countries in the world. Among them is Malaysia. Next, please. Yeah. And because of this war, airports and access points to the world were blocked and closed since 2015. Yemen becomes like a big prison that you cannot escape and flee, and also you cannot come back. Next. This is like just a map to show how it's very difficult for a Yemeni to go out or to exit from Yemen, because the sea surrounds from the two sides, and also we have long border with Saudi Arabia and with Oman. Unfortunately, just very little number of people, they can go and cross the borders. Next. Okay. So this is about the Yemeni refugees in Malaysia. I want to highlight here the Yemenis, they are living here in Malaysia. We can classify them into two types. We have the refugees and we have the displaced. Refugees, there are two types so far. Those they already got the UN card or the card holder. The number of the card holder is about 3,000. But we have also like almost 1,000. They are just still applying for the cards, and the application is in process. So in total, there are about 4,000. Displaced people, I mean by the displaced people, those Yemenis who came to Malaysia, and the Malaysian government and authority, which we thank them very much for their support. They grant them a social visit pass, which lasts for 6 months to 12 months. And also, among this number, we have a few hundreds of people who is stranded here in Malaysia. They cannot go back to Yemen. Next. The tragic lives of displaced and refugees in Yemen, in Malaysia. Living far from your country, family, relatives, and friends, also receiving bad and tragic news almost on daily basis, like death, sickness, bombing of your country, struggling for livelihood to secure the basic necessities, food, accommodation, etc., and also trying to adapt with the new environment and society, culturally and socially. All these issues, Yemenis here in Malaysia, they are suffering of. The results of this will be psychologically problems. We have life stress, depression, anxiety. To some extent, we have some maybe suicide. Some people, or we have like 2 cases now, they commit suicide here in Malaysia. Back, please. Yeah. And also we have, this one also reflected in the social life. We have the divorce cases, we have domestic violence among the Yemenis here in Malaysia. Next. Challenges and needs. The main challenges, I will just highlight the main challenges that the Yemenis here they are facing. One is stopping renewal, the visa renewal for next years. This is for the displaced people, not for the refugees. Refugees, they don't need this visa. But because they are not able, the displaced people here, they are not able to go back. So at the end of the day, they may overstay and may stay in Malaysia as illegal, or they will go and apply for the UN refugee cards. Next. Yeah, other challenge is they are not allowed to work, both the refugees and the displaced. And you can imagine for people, they are living here for like 4 or 5 years. Before this, but they cannot secure anything for their needs. Yeah, next one, please. No access to education, school, universities. Education is our, as Yemenis, battle for better future. Students in Yemen face difficulties to access schools. Students outside Yemen, they also face difficulties to access schools. So the whole generation is almost lost. Okay, next, please. So here, Stand with Yemen is actually a call to stand with Yemenis. Yemenis in Yemen and also Yemenis in Malaysia, which I think the government and the authority and this coalition for Stand with Yemen, they will go further with these demands or with these needs until we hope that one day they will be fulfilled, inshallah. Next. The needs, this is permit to work, and this may solve more than 70% of people's problems and challenges. Yemenis are hardworking people and like to earn their money by themselves. And they don't like to be dependent on charity. Next. Visa renewal, as we said, for the displaced people. So at least they can live secure, in secure environment here in Malaysia. Next. For education, also this is the investment in human resources. This is helping building schools for Yemenis. NGOs here in Malaysia, they can also help addressing this issue. And also for the government to allow access to public schools, especially for Yemenis in the other states, where there is no Arabic or international schools that Yemenis they can go and to learn. Allowing displaced and refugees Yemenis, back please. Yeah, allowing displaced and refugees to join universities. Because actually these people, they are the leaders of the future. If we want to build and rebuild what the world has destroyed or is destroying, unfortunately. Next. This is also for the healthcare, which is, as you all know, this is very costly for the locals and for all the people. So what about these poor people here in Malaysia? Next. Actually, this is what all I have so far. Thank you very much for listening. Terima kasih and shukran jazilan.
Thank you so much, Dr. Al-Rahman Al-Mamri. You have given a perspective of the Yemenis, especially the refugees in Malaysia. And I think the next panelist I would like to invite would be my friend Dr. James Jose, who is a senior fellow at the Rajaratnam School of International Studies at Singapore Nanyang Technology University. He has written numerous papers and published on his blogs, and I've been following him for the past few years, and now we are friends. Dr. James.
Thank you, Ahmed. Ministers, Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it's a privilege and an honor to be here, and a delight to be back in Kuala Lumpur. I've been asked to focus attention on the role and the position of Saudi Arabia. And as was implicitly evident in the remarks of the Prime Minister this morning, one cannot see what is happening in Yemen independently of the broader trends and developments in the Middle East. So bear with me if I at times digress from the narrow focus on Yemen. These are tough times for Saudi Arabia. Obviously, the drama enveloping the killing of journalist Jamal Khashoggi and the brutal way in which it was carried out have captured public attention. In reality, however, Saudi Arabia's real problems began with its conduct of the Yemen war. Saudi interference in Yemen that culminated in military intervention predates the four-year-old war. Yemen has long been perceived as a threat by Saudi Arabia. That threat went far beyond current Iranian support for the Houthis. In fact, it was changing Saudi attitudes towards the Houthis and Saudi Arabia's global campaign to promote anti-Shiite, anti-Iranian strands of ultra-conservative Sunni Muslim Islam that paved the way for the current Yemen crisis. It is only half a century ago that the Houthis were part of a Saudi effort to confront Arab nationalism. As an aside, Saudis and Israelis cooperated already then, with Israeli military aircraft dropping weapons for the Saudi-backed rebels that included the Houthis. Saudi-Houthi relations deteriorated just after the turn to this century, when the Saudis funded the opening of a Salafi center on the outskirts of the Houthi capital Sa'ada as part of their more than 4-decade-long $100 billion campaign to promote ultra-conservatism globally. The center constituted not only a challenge to the Houthis as such, but also to the power of the traditional Houthi leadership. It successfully appealed to the socially disadvantaged, as well as youth who were attracted to Salafism's egalitarianism and resented the power of the older generation and saw Puritan Islam as a vehicle to change the traditional hierarchy. Fear of the Wahhabi Salafi encroachment fueled the Houthis' armed resistance against the Saudis, which ultimately led to the kingdom's military intervention in Yemen in March 2015. To counter the threat, the leadership of the Houthis, Zaidis, who are Shiites with practices more akin to Sunni Muslim ritual, turned to Iran for support in religious education, a development that further angered the kingdom and laid the groundwork for a war that has devastated a country that already ranked as one of the world's poorest. I would argue that the Saudi intervention was about more than just confronting an alleged Iranian proxy on its doorstep. For one, if anything, it was the intervention that really drove the Houthis and Iranians closer to one another. Even so, Houthis remain an opportunity, or an Iranian opportunity, in a far broader Saudi-Iranian rivalry rather than a strategic target. And not only an Iranian opportunity. As President Trump prepares to meet the leader of North Korea, a secret United Nations report suggests that North Korea, operating through a Syrian arms dealer, is also arming the Houthis. The Salmans, the king and his son, have since coming to office, and despite the emergence of Trump, taken to new heights a far more assertive foreign and military policy that was crafted by their predecessors in response to the popular Arab revolts in 2011. Make, however, no mistake. Saudi Arabia's new assertiveness is not a declaration of independence from the United States, even if the kingdom is expanding its international relations, as is evident in Prince Mohammed's presence this week in Asia. On the contrary, Mohammed made that very clear in multiple interviews. His goal is to force the United States to re-engage in the Middle East as the best guarantor for regional stability. The Saudis appear to be operating on the basis of Karl Marx's Verelendungstheorie. Things have to get worse to get better. That is part of the backdrop of the stalled military intervention in Yemen. Dangling Iran as the real threat emanating from Yemen serves the Saudis' purpose. In doing so, Saudi Arabia has proven to be ruthless. It is a ruthlessness that is driven by a perception that Iran poses an existential threat to Saudi Arabia. In fact, that may not be incorrect. Certainly from the perception of the monarchy and its ruling family. Saudi Arabia dazzles with the billions of dollars gained from oil exports that it is able to invest overseas and the investment opportunities it creates in the kingdom itself. But the truth of the matter is that the long-term future of Saudi Arabia is not that of a regional hegemon, but of a second fiddle state. Saudi regional leadership, even if it has been tarnished in Yemen in military and reputational terms, amounts to exploitation of a window of opportunity rather than reliance on the assets and power needed to sustain it. Saudi Arabia's interest is to extend the window of opportunity for as long as possible. That window of opportunity exists as long as the obvious regional powers, Iran, Turkey, and Egypt, are in various degrees of disrepair. Moreover, punitive economic sanctions and international isolation take care of Iran for now. And that is what bites. Iran may not be Arab and maintains a sense of Persian superiority, but it has, like Turkey and Egypt, the assets Saudi Arabia lacks: a large population base, an industrial base, a huge domestic market, a battle-hardened military, a deep-rooted culture, a history of empire, and a geography that makes it a crossroads. Mecca and money will not be able to compete. Add to this two factors. The Islamic regime in Iran came to power in a revolution that preceded the 2011 Arab revolts by 32 years. Moreover, the Iranian Revolution toppled a monarch, not a president, and an icon of US power in the Middle East. Perhaps more importantly, if one disregards the sanctioning of Iran, it is Iran, rather than Saudi Arabia, that is likely to shape the energy architecture in the future of Eurasia. Oil, in terms of demand, is a diminishing commodity. If the long-term future is renewables, the medium term will be shaped by gas. Iran has gas. Saudi Arabia does not, at least not the kind of gas it can export. In fact, Iran has the world's second largest gas reserves. Again, disregarding the sanctions, Iran would have in the next 5 years 24.6 billion cubic meters available for annual piped exports beyond its current supply commitments. If I am correct, and Iran poses an existential threat to the rule of the Al Saud family that it cannot eliminate and at best contain with the support of the United States, the question is what Saudi Arabia's goal in Yemen is, as well as its broader rivalry with Iran. I would not disagree with those who argue that Saudi Arabia's goal in Yemen may have initially been the rollback of Houthi advances with their occupation of the Yemeni capital Sana'a and large parts of Yemen. destruction of Houthi power, and forcing them into a situation in which they would have to accept a Saudi-dictated end to the war. 4 years into the war, that is clearly not a realistic goal. Short of that, the question is how sincere Saudi, and for that matter, United Arab Emirates' interest is in finding a way out of the war. In my mind, short of outright victory, Saudi Arabia would want to keep Yemen weak and the Houthis militarily on the defensive. That is at best only sustainable in the short term. Fact of the matter is that the reputational damage Saudi Arabia has suffered is starting to hurt. Witness measures taken by the US Congress and Germany's decision to halt arms sales to the kingdom. Conflicts are only ended, if not resolved, if the pain of continuing the conflict is greater than the pain of ending it. In Yemen, Saudi Arabia could well be nearing that inflection point. The problem is that even if the United Nations and Swedish-mediated peace talks ultimately produce an end to the war, Yemen, if anything, will pose in the post-war era an even greater and more real threat. Yemen, for much of the post-World War II history, has been an afterthought in the international community, if it sparked a thought at all. Yet, what a post-war Yemen will represent is a devastated country that largely needs to be rebuilt from scratch, a country whose traumatized population has suffered one of the world's worst humanitarian disasters and will need all the aftercare that goes with that. Beyond the taking care of the most immediate humanitarian issues, there is little reason to believe that investors and governments with massive aid packages will be knocking on Yemen's doors. Like in Syria and Yemen, the risk is the emergence of a generation that has nothing to look forward to, nothing to lose, and that deeply resents what Saudi Arabia has done to their country. If Saudi Arabia long saw Yemen as the Gulf's most populous nation with a battle-hardened military that needed to be managed, that new generation is likely to put flesh on the skeleton. It's not a pretty picture to look forward to, and it is one in which the damage has already been done. Having said that, it's never too late to try to limit the damage, if not reverse affairs. That, however, would take the kind of courage and vision that Prince Mohammed and others in power in Saudi Arabia have yet to demonstrate. Thank you.
Thank you, James. Yeah, that's a little bit about the geopolitics of the situation in Yemen. And of course, the stakes that are in Yemen, and of course the gravity of the situation, and especially the reputation of Saudi Arabia, which is deteriorating. And despite that, I believe that this war would not have lasted that long without the support of the European countries and the United States, especially, and Great Britain. And as I mentioned to you last night, that the recent bombing of the bus full of school children in Yemen was basically they managed to isolate the missile, and it was made in the United States. And these are some of the things that I think we have to discuss, and I believe that none other than the best intellectual and political scientist in Malaysia, Dr. Chandra Safa, who could look beyond it. When you described last time the issue in Syria, that the war was not about Sunni and Shia, but it was initially because of the gas pipeline that goes towards Syria, along the border. And I believe that you would have your own interpretation of this situation in Yemen. Prof.
Dr. Farouk, friends, peace be with you. I would like to look at this topic from a Malaysian perspective, because this is the topic that was given to me. The crisis in Yemen, a Malaysian response. A lot of Malaysians have responded to this crisis from a humanitarian perspective, and that's very obvious. The suffering of the Yemeni people, the alleged 85,000 children who have been killed, about the famine, cholera. This has been the response of quite a lot of Malaysians. When I say that this has been the response of quite a lot of Malaysians, we must keep in mind that this is only a small segment of the Malaysian population that has responded to the Yemen crisis. But that is not unusual. Even in other societies, those who respond to tragedies of this sort would be a portion of society, not the entire society. But there's something else which is disturbing about the response of Malaysians to this tragedy. By and large, if you look at that small segment that has responded, it is Muslim, Malay Muslim, that has responded to this tragedy. There are not many non-Muslims who have responded to the Yemen tragedy in Malaysia. And this is true of many other similar tragedies. Of course, every tragedy has its own unique characteristics, but whether it is the Rohingya crisis in Rakhine State, or the Moros of the southern Philippines, or if you look at Iraq, 2003, Palestinians, you find that non-Muslims in Malaysia are not that responsive. Why is this so? Because if you look at, say, the Palestinian tragedy, you will find that quite a lot of non-Muslims in other countries are very, very responsive. Even in countries which are part of the attempt to suppress the rights of the Palestinians. But ordinary people in the United States of America, in Britain, in France, they're responsive to the Palestinian crisis. But in Malaysia, the non-Muslim population is not as responsive as it should be. We have to be very candid about this. Why? The reason should be obvious to most of us. It is because the way Malaysians respond to a certain crisis, a tragedy, is conditioned and colored by ethnicity, by religion. This is the truth, that a lot of non-Muslims in this country, they look at Yemen, and they say, well, this is Muslim. Muslim means Malay. Malay means this is the Malay reality that they have to deal with in this country. And there isn't much empathy at that level. Individuals, groups here and there, that's a different matter. There may be some empathy. But at the collective level, there isn't much empathy. I've seen this for years as far as Palestine is concerned. How difficult it has been for us to elicit support from non-Muslims in this country for the Palestinian cause. Whether it is collecting donations or asking them to take a stand, you find that there is a certain reluctance. Let me also add that this is partly due to the way in which Muslims, a lot of Malays in Malaysia, look at tragedies of this sort. In other words, this is also the product of the way in which Malays and Muslims, say, Yemen, Rohingya crisis, or the Moro crisis, or Palestine. What do I mean by this? You find that within the Malaysian context, all these tragedies, which are universal because they are tragedies that are linked to injustice, oppression, suppression, these are universal challenges. But in the case of Malaysia, you'll find that quickly, very, very quickly, tragedies of this sort become ethnic, because the Malay Muslim community tends to see these tragedies through an ethnic lens. That's part of the problem. Palestine is a good example. In the case of Palestine, you find that quite a lot of Malays and Muslims, for them it is a Muslim cause. The moment of approach to put away the non-Muslims. And this has happened for quite a long while. One can understand a certain sympathy for people who share your faith. But when you do not see the underlying dimensions of justice, of fairness, of compassion, somehow you're not able to see that, and you don't connect with it, very quickly that issue becomes ethnic. And once it becomes ethnic, it is seen as Malay. You find that non-Malays also become reluctant to respond to that crisis. This is a Malaysian dilemma, a Malaysian tragedy, the way in which we look at challenges of this sort. Let me also add that quite a lot of non-Muslims in Malaysia were very concerned about Yemen, and rightly so, about Palestine, the Rohingyas, Syria, and all the rest of it. A lot of Muslims show very little concern for the sufferings of non-Muslims on the global stage. For instance, the blockade of Cuba that has been going on for decades. How much concern is there amongst Muslims who are concerned about justice, but when it comes to the Cubans, there isn't much concern? Or when it comes to Venezuela, what's happening now in Venezuela, there's not much concern. Or for that matter, what had happened in the past in Rwanda, which has a very, very small Muslim population, or the Congo, or tragedies of that sort. In other words, our response to tragedies, both Muslims and non-Muslims, it's shaped to a great extent by ethnicity and religion, which is very unfortunate. We have to overcome this. We have to see tragedies of this sort for what they are. These are tragedies because what operates in situations like this, what happens in situations like this, is this challenge to justice. We should respond because justice is involved, because there's oppression, because there is suffering, and it's human suffering, regardless of religion and ethnicity. It's our failure to do this, which to my mind is a shame. I want to mention this partly because of what's been happening in Venezuela, which in some ways reflects some of the things that have happened in Yemen, but it's a different situation, we know that. But very few Malaysians know that Venezuelans have stood up for the Palestinians, they've stood up for Syria, they've stood up for Iran. In all these situations, these are all Muslim majority situations, but the Venezuelans have stood up for these people. Just like the Cubans. Cuba has been a faithful supporter of the Palestinian cause for decades. And yet you find that when it comes to understanding the Cubans or the Venezuelans or others, we are not able to respond. The plea here is to go beyond ethnicity and religion. The plea here is to understand justice and injustice as they should be understood. To look at compassion from a human perspective, beyond our tribal affiliations. It's a very big challenge. A second issue that I want to raise here, you'll find that when we report on Yemen in the local media, and the way in which even civil society groups understand Yemen, the humanitarian dimension, a little bit about what is supposed to be happening, about Houthis and about the Saudis and the other actors, Iran and so on in the conflict. But in terms of understanding the issue in depth, why this has happened, there is a history to this. There's a context. Every crisis has got a context. It has got a history. That Yemen was a divided land. North and South Yemen were brought together. Some say through circumstances which ensured that that alliance would not last. But they were brought together, North and South Yemen, as a single nation. It is linked to so many other factors, not just Sunni Shia. And if you look at the situation of the Houthis, as James Dorsey pointed out, they were backed by the Saudis at one time. If you look at even the major actors, they'd been backed by different actors outside Yemen. If you look at every aspect of the Yemen crisis, it's very complex. It's very, very complex. It's also linked to resources. It's linked to the strategic location of Yemen. Very, very strategic in terms of geopolitics. The Red Sea, world trade. It's linked to politics and dominance of the region. But somehow these things don't emerge in our newspapers, in our popular media. You'll seldom come across an article that discusses these things in depth. And many of our editors are not interested in these type of articles. They would rather have articles that contribute towards the superficial, simplistic thinking about Yemen. In other words, friends, what I'm saying is our media has played a very big role in ensuring that popular understanding of Yemen will remain at a superficial and simplistic level. They don't discuss issues in depth. And that goes for many other issues in this country. Whether it is the death penalty or its ethnic relations or the economy, superficiality, simplicity in terms of trying to explain situations, these are the outstanding traits. We don't really probe, we don't analyze, we don't try to understand in depth. And this, I think, is a pity, because that leads me to the third dimension that I want to highlight here. It is because there's no in-depth understanding of any issue, and in our context, Yemen, that the Malaysian government could have got away with what it did as far as Yemen is concerned. I want to call a spade a spade. There is no doubt at all that the intention right from the outset of stationing troops in Saudi Arabia was not for Malaysian students. That was a farce. It was a camouflage. The Malaysian government was clearly on the side of Saudi Arabia. We forget important things that had happened before that. There was an attempt to build a coalition of Muslim states. Initially, some of us would have missed this. Malaysia was part of it. And then Malaysia was dropped. Pakistan was also part of that coalition. But in the case of Pakistan, there was a great within Pakistani society. And Nawaz Sharif had to announce that Pakistan was not part of that coalition. So we were part of a coalition which did not have the blessings of the Malaysian people. Worse, stationing troops in a foreign land violates Malaysian political protocol and the Malaysian constitution. You have to get the permission of the Malaysian parliament. If you want to station troops in another country, especially if it is not under the flag of the United Nations, all our foreign troop emplacements, right from the beginning, 1960, the Congo, they've been with the approval of the Malaysian Parliament, but more important, it's always been under the flag of the United Nations. We have never sent troops to support another country. But they got away with this because Parliament didn't question. People in the opposition too didn't raise many questions. Some of them are now part of the government. But there were one or two voices here and there, but basically they didn't raise this question, which was a fundamental issue. And they kept them there for quite a while, under this pretext that it was to look after our students and to bring them back. People ask, why did we do this? I think someone raised this question some time ago. Why did we do this? Because we had developed a special relationship with Saudi Arabia under the previous government. And that special relationship was linked to money. So cash is king was not just employed within Malaysia, it also applied to bilateral and international relations. A cash relationship with money, of debts, loans, and so on and so forth. This was a total deviation from a foreign policy which by and large, if you look at Malaysian foreign policy, has been principled. Especially if you look at our involvement through the United Nations, a fairly principled foreign policy. And even if you look at regional ties and so on, we have tried to be as principled as possible, though sometimes it's very difficult. But here we are deviated completely. And the Malaysian public, partly because they were ignorant, partly because opinion makers did not speak up, and even if they did, the media did not give any coverage, because the media was also complicit. People in the media knew what was happening, but they didn't want to talk about it. They didn't publish stories, they were not reported. Now, this happened partly because of the lack of depth in our understanding of bilateral, regional, and international issues. Part of the reason. But it's also because of vested interests. In fact, vested interests were really the determinant. Some people were concerned about their own position. They felt this was the way to protect their own interests. We're talking of the previous regime, Mujahid, don't worry. Yes, the previous regime. So this was the situation that prevailed at that time. And that brings me to the next point I want to make. I think the media has a very, very big role in trying to shape our thinking about Yemen and about other issues. The media has to play its role, an honest role, in discussing these issues. You find that very often when it comes to domestic issues, media personnel, they'll have their excuses. They will say it's because it's sensitive, it's difficult, and so on. But even international relations, this is what they do. They don't want to go into depth. And even when there's an attempt to do so, they very quietly set aside articles of that sort. So don't depend upon the mainstream media. Don't depend upon the print media, the mainstream electronic media to enlighten ourselves. But what is good about the present age, why it is good that we are living in this era, you find a lot of alternative sources of information. And I would like to suggest here, Mr. Moderator and friends, that let us access these alternative sources. When it comes to all these issues, including Yemen, what the underlying forces are at work, and why these things are happening, and issues like Syria and Iraq, Palestine, all these issues, Venezuela, Cuba, Bolivia. Let's look at the alternative media. And there are these channels. There's Global Research, one of the best alternative channels from Canada, from Ottawa. There is Countercurrents from India. There is Information Clearing House. There is Counterpunch. There is Transcend Media Service, run by Johan Galtung, a leading peace activist. There are all these channels. And if you would allow me, there is also the Just website. We carry the other voice. And if you'd allow me to say this, it sounds a little immodest, the Just website has 2.69 million hits on an annual basis, which makes it one of the more popular international relations websites. But I'm absolutely certain that many of my Malaysian friends don't know of this website, have never accessed it, because that is the tragedy, that we do not seek these alternative channels, partly because we're not a very curious people. When something happens, if there is curiosity, you want to find out. If you're the type who likes to read, you want to explore these alternative avenues. We don't do that. And this is the reason why we remain ignorant about what's happening. So let us explore alternative sites and discover the real story behind all the things that we are exposed to. Friends, I'm convinced that if the media had a different role and civil society groups played their role in a different manner, it would be possible to mobilize people, because that's what one is really concerned about. Mobilize people for certain causes. Can we mobilize people worldwide? I'm not just talking of Malaysia. We are a small country. Worldwide, can we mobilize people on behalf of the suffering masses of Yemen? We keep on saying it is the greatest humanitarian disaster of recent times. But what are we doing? Can we mobilize the masses? Get people to sign petitions, to come together for meetings, to really act, not just talk, act. This is what is needed. Let us be encouraged, enthused by the fact that this has happened before, even in recent times. You know, when it came to Iraq, 2003, the largest peace mobilization in history took place in the campaign on behalf of the people of Iraq against the invasion and occupation of Iraq. This is not highlighted in a media that is dominated by certain interests, mainly Zionist interests. They don't report these things. But 50 million people were mobilized. 50 million in the case of Iraq. And this includes not just those who took part in demonstrations, those who signed petitions, candlelight processions, people who made phone calls, little kids who sent messages to the powers that be. 50 million people. You would ask, what happened? In the end, war took place. Yes, true. But it is because of mass mobilization that the people of the world delegitimized the Iraq war. The Security Council was not able to adopt a resolution legitimizing the war. In other words, sanctioning the war in Iraq, partly because of mass mobilization and the moral power lent by people like the late Pope John Paul II. These things counted. So there is a moral force that one must try to mobilize. It was done in the case of Iraq. It is now being attempted in the case of Venezuela. A lot of groups are standing up, different parts of the world. I think that's very, very significant. Here in Malaysia, we may not be aware of this, but it is happening, which is why we are asking the good people gathered here this morning to perhaps sign a petition on Venezuela. This is about Yemen, I know, but Just is helping with this campaign, collecting signatures, sending it to various groups, including some of the partners we work with in the United States, in the belly of the beast, but against what the US is doing in Venezuela. Undermining an elected president, planning intervention in the name of humanitarian assistance. It is totally insane what is being done. Don't forget, again, history and context. The US has been doing this to Venezuela for a long while. Don't think that this just began with Maduro. It's a long while. Don't forget that in 2002, 11th of April, they tried to overthrow the elected leader of Venezuela, Hugo Chavez. It's a fact, which the New York Times admitted. It was a coup, an attempt to overthrow Chavez. It failed. Because this is the only instance in recent history where the people came out in their thousands and restored Chavez to the presidency after 3 days, even though he was ousted by people working with the United States of America. So the point I'm making is that we can mobilize, and we should try to mobilize. Yemen, it deserves that sort of support right across the globe from people everywhere. If 85,000 children are killed, and if our conscience is not affected by this, what are we? Are we human beings? If we can just accept this without acting, without responding to this sort of situation. So we should stand up. We should stand up for the people of Yemen and for justice in the larger sense, regardless of who we are. And we can push this agenda forward. Again, I go back to Venezuela as a way of drawing a parallel comparison. Isn't it remarkable, talking about how people are beginning to stand up, that partly because so many civil society groups have come out and a segment of the media has come out, 50 ambassadors, 50, to the United Nations, they stood outside the UN Security Council just a few days ago to protest against US intervention in Venezuela. It has never happened before. 50 ambassadors from various countries. Unfortunately, the Malaysian ambassador was not among them. Because, you know, Malaysia, we like to be cautious, we have to be very careful and so on, you know. I think the Prime Minister is bolder than the Ministry of Foreign Affairs when it comes to issues like this, or many others. He said some very bold things in his text, in his speech. I think it is important that we stand up. In the case of Venezuela, we should have stood up, both as a government and as the people. Just as we have stood up for a very long while for the people of Cuba. But that is something which is not that remarkable. Why? Because all the nations of the world have stood by Cuba when it comes to sanctions. Every year, every time this vote is brought before the United Nations General Assembly, all nations except two, in the last few occasions, US and Israel, have voted for Cuba. So us voting for Cuba is not that remarkable. But I think when it comes to Venezuela, maybe other situations in the future, when it comes to Yemen, let's take the lead. Let Malaysia, government and the people working together, take the lead on the question of Yemen. Let's mobilize. Partly because we have a very deep historical connection with Yemen, which is something that a lot of Malaysians are not aware of. That if you look at the Arab element of the Malaysian population, the Arab element, a lot of them actually have their roots in Hadramaut. A lot of them have their roots in what is Yemen today. I'm not saying that that should be the reason, but it is one of the factors that one has to take into account. So stand up for Yemen, defend the cause of justice, not simply because it is Yemen, because it is a just cause. And that just cause demands the response of all human beings everywhere. And a human being, by definition, is a creation that is capable of the highest demonstration of commitment to justice and compassion. Let's demonstrate that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Chandra. It's very good that you managed to point out some of the things that are probably controversial, and the Malaysian government has their own stand to be seen to be impartial in a way, right? And they're very cautious in uttering their words and in basically stand up on certain issues, and especially in Yemeni issues. And we understand about the influence of Saudi Arabia on the Malaysian government before, now even currently, right? And I think for the last panelist, final panelist is Dr. Mujahid Yusuf Rawal, who is a minister in the Prime Minister's Department in charge of religious affairs. He came from Penang, born and bred in Penang. He's son of the late Yusuf Rawal, Haji Yusuf Rawal, who was the president of the PAS, Islamic Party, when there was this spark during that Islamic Renaissance time in 1979 because of the revolution of Iran. Iran has just celebrated the 40th year. He was the Malaysian ambassador. So when he came back to Penang, I was among the first who attended his talk in one of the mosques in Penang. So I still remember, and he's a good friend of mine. We have been schoolmates together at Penang Free School. And this 1979 revolution in Iran, and we have the Iranian ambassador here, Madam Afghan, and has somehow rejuvenated PAS, Islamic Party, to change its discourse to become what we call as the synonym with Wilayatul Faqih of Iran. So they have this leadership of the clergy, of the ulama. And of course now he's with Amanah, breakaway party of PAS, because I think all of you know PAS today is it's not the same PAS of the time of Yusuf Rawal and father-in-law. And because of that, Amanah Party is trying to promote what is known as post-Islamism nowadays. I wouldn't go into details of that, but I think it's time for us to hear from him, good friend of mine. You can have.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh. Peace be upon all of you. Alhamdulillah wassalatu wassalam ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa ashabihi wa man tabi'ahu wa wala. Terima kasih kepada Dato' Dr. Farouk Musa. Indeed, he's my schoolmate. We were together in the alma mater of Penang Free School, the oldest school in Southeast Asia. And I think other panelists that have just spoken, Dr. Abdul Rahman Al-Ma'mari spoke on behalf of the Yemenis abroad, especially in Malaysia. Dr. James, who spoke on the Saudi policy against the Yemenis issue. Dr. Chandra Muzaffar, my dear friend, of course, I've known him since I began knowing politics and justice. I've already read his article in the Just magazine, and before that, Aliran. And also distinguished guests, Tan Sri Razali, Tan Sri Dr. Zulkifli, Professor Dr. Zulkifli, and dear excellencies of all the ambassadors today. And also we have with us the patriot, the retired General Armies, together with us also in this session. Thank you very much for making it today. All of the speakers have highlighted their points of view in their own premises. I would not want to repeat it because I have chosen a new premise to talk about the crisis in Yemen, a little bit philosophy, but also I'm trying to trickle down on the practical aspect of how other nations for the future or to move forward to avoid such circumstances happen. And it could emulate a very good example that in spite of what we talk about wars, killings, malnutrition, famine, there are still hope in other regions of this country, especially Malaysia and Southeast Asia. Ladies and gentlemen, I will begin with the fact that whatever we have said about the government policy, I represent the government as a member of the cabinet, but I do have my preferred values that I should refer to as to become the government or the minister with principle. In that light, there is no other way I can do it but to look into myself first as a Muslim. What is it that in me that I see in all these issues that is taking place all over the world, including our precious Yemen? I will begin with the firman of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran, as that is my most preferred values. Allah has said about the value of humanity and human dignity. وَلَقَدْ كَرَّمْنَا بَنِي آدَمَ وَحَمَلْنَاهُمْ فِي الْبَرِّ وَالْبَحْرِ وَرَزَقْنَاهُمْ مِنَ الطَّيِّبَاتِ وَفَضَّلْنَاهُمْ عَلَى كَثِيرٍ مِمَّنْ خَلَقْنَا تَفْضِيلًا. From Al-Isra 70, Allah has said, we have honored the sons of Adam, that is human being, provided them with transports and land on sea and on air, and on land and sea. Give them for sustenance things good and pure, and conferred on them special favors above a great part of our creation. It all begins here, my dear brothers and sisters. Once we look into ourselves to respect human dignity, then there is no place in this world that killing, slaughtering, and war will take place. Because it is this dignity that is lost in us. Leaders, fighters, interventionists, and even the ministers themselves. So that is why we have to come back to the concept of human values. It has been mentioned by my good brothers, Dr. Chandra Muzaffar. Why are we not talking about Cuba? Why we are not talking about Venezuela? Why are Muslim only talking about when Muslim is at stake? Why? This is about humanity. This is about وَلَقَدْ كَرَّمْنَا بَنِي آدَمَ. And God did not say وَلَقَدْ كَرَّمْنَا مُسْلِمِينَ bas. But He said Adam, Bani Adam. Everyone is the sons of Adam here. Black or white, Arabs or non-Arab, Muslim or non-Muslim. We are the creation of God. And we need to come back to these values before we can make any policy. It does not end there. The whole structure will tell you that whatever leads to war, aggression, that sprouts from the factor of hatred, that sprouts from the factor of racism, that sprouts from the factor of sectarianism, are all been said clearly in Islam. I can conclude all those values with one sentence from Al-Ma'idah 32, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, Min ajli dhalika katabna ala bani Israel annahu man qatala nafsan بغير نفس أو فساد في الأرض فكأنما قتل الناس جميعا ومن أحياها فكأنما أحيا الناس جميعا ولقد جاءتهم رسلنا بالبينات ثم إن كثيرا منهم بعد ذلك في الأرض لمسرفون. Allah has said it very clearly. I'm talking about my preferred values before I talk about policies. On that account, we ordained for the children of Israel that if anyone slew or killed a person it would be as if he slew or killed the whole people. One soul being killed, it is as if the whole soul in the entire world have been killed. This is the imagination of the words of God. Killing one means killing the whole entire nation. If you times that with what happened in Yemen, plus Palestine, plus other nations, plus Rohingya, then you will see the sheer amount of transgression that we have made in this world. Allah said that if anyone saved a life of the whole people, today we are doing things of saving life. Today we are saving people's life, a humanitarian mission. And we should applaud and laud global peace mission for such a big task to save the life. Because although they are just saving the life in Yemen, actually they are saving the life of the whole entire soul in this universe. And that is very applauding. Of the whole people then, although they came to them our message with clear signs, this is very clear signs. Nobody wants to be killed or nobody wants to kill someone. That is the clear signs that has been taught in all the books, inherited from all the books of the Jews, of the Christians, of the Muslims, the Ahlul Kitab. And definitely, it goes in line with all the religion of the world, who do not promote violence and killing. I don't know if there is any religion that promotes violence and killing. Violence and killing does not come from any form of religion, because violence and killing has no religion. This is the preferred values that I was talking about. But yet, this is the challenge, dear brothers and sisters. Even after that, many of them continue to commit excess in the land, that continue to kill, that continue to transgress. All this has been ordained by God. Ladies and gentlemen, I begin here so that I am very clear. The issue in Yemen and also other parts of the world should be looked into the context of human dignity, human values, and human rights issues. Not on the context of just belief. Because if you have this clarity in your mind, then we can feel free to talk about suffering without being binded or bonded with other issues that ultimately will defeat the purpose of these preferred values. This is for me, as long as a Muslim, this is what I believe. I don't know about you, but this is about me, what I believe. Because if any policy that should take place in any government of the world, including Malaysia, this should be the preferred values. And because of that, Tan Sri Razali has pointed out rightly, although some people say this is a local issue, this is about Yemen, this is about Saudi, or this is about Iran, this is about Malaysia, this is about Myanmar. Why are you interfering? Let us solve our problem. Yes, that has been the practice of non-interference. We do not interfere to instigate your problem. We do not interfere to monopolize your economy. We do not instigate to create havoc in your political stability. But definitely, in as far as human values and concern is concerned, then we do not know any geographical boundaries, because we are human. You can dictate whatever policies in your own country, and that's what leaders do. Give prosperity to your people. Create harmony and unity to your people. Give light to all those who are oppressed. Be a strong nation. Prosper thy neighbor, as Tun Mahathir has clearly said it in the United Nations address. Malaysia wants to become a country that do not fight against any other country. nor is it interested to be dragged into their conflict. But we are very clear on the issue of human values, atrocities, transgression, killings, war, that has got nothing to do with the policy of development, but this is something to do with destruction of human values and human dignity. Then I believe Malaysia should take its stand. And that is exactly what we did. It is translated into our concern about Yemen. If I may, there was a lot of question why we in the first place participated in the Saudi-led coalition. I've asked this question when I was an opposition member on record. I have asked this question. That time, Hishamuddin Tun Hussein was the defense minister. I've asked the question, I've debated in the parliament that Malaysia should not interfere by sending army troops, not on United Nations accord, but sending based on nation to nation, which has never been preceded before. I've questioned that. Malaysians sent two group, one which is a small 42 officers in the Operasi Yaman 1. Reason being, they were just operating in the operation room. They are not involved in the attack. But nevertheless, on Operasi Yaman 2, they have sent another troop in the coalition with the Saudi-led coalition against Yemen. I've asked the question of why is it that if 42 troops were sent in the operation room that you have to send all your other devices? They say they want to learn. You don't learn by helping others to kill other people. That's a bad way to learn. I've made a PC after that. And the defense minister refuted that and said this is a false allegation. But Alhamdulillah, when Pakatan Harapan came into power with the will of the people through a democratic peace process, we have taken a very clear stand on our presence in Yemen. And it is against the new government policy of not interfering or dragging into the other people's war. And in May 2018, we have withdraw all our armies in Yemen to reflect our clear stand on this issue. Alhamdulillah. Ladies and gentlemen, there are not only Yemen, there are other issues, including what happened when few people who are oppressed in the majority country came and see me as a minister of religious affairs. I welcome anyone to come and see me. Ahlan wa sahlan, wa marhaban bikum. Al-bab maftuh. The door is open. Please, be farme. And if anyone wants to come and see me and talk about they've been deprived of their rights, they've been oppressed, they have been killed, or they've been deprived of their right to believe, rights of their faith, definitely I will listen. Because Islam do not compel others. Islam is very clear on the freedom of faith. To you, your faith. To me, mine. This is what I believe. This is what you believe. Alhamdulillah. It is not my duty to say you are astray. It is the duty of Allah to tell you that. My duty is to engage. My duty is to dialogue. My duty is to get the message of peace, which is the concern of all religion. And if we can work on that basis, there is no reason for a minister not to meet anyone who wants to spread the message of peace. I come to the last point, how do we trickle down into our policy today, especially in my ministry? We know that what happened in Yemen is not about sectarian violence. It's not about Shia and Sunni fighting one another. It was never before in Iraq also. But this sectarianism has been exploited to a certain extent for the purpose of sentiments and emotions, so that people are driven away by the fact that transgression has happened, killing has happened. Well, some people might say, good, so that the Shia get killed. Wal-iyazu billah. Good, so that the Sunni get killed. Wal-iyazu billah. Sunni or Shia, if they get killed, both of them fight in the name of sectarianism, they will be condemned to hell. Because Islam is a religion that do not promote hatred against any form of sectarianism. But yet they use this form. They say this is because of sectarian violence, which we say, no, this is geopolitical. This is about another country trying to exert its power. This is about geopolitical in the region. A big brother feeling threat, another big brother say, hey, this is mine. And they write on Islam, and they write on sectarianism. I cannot and will not accept such fact. Not only me, all of us must stand against all this, because this is about human values. This is about human dignity. Yes, we heard about a lot of wars in the Middle East. Everything is about war, everything is about killing. Yes, we hear about Rohingya being slaughtered. Yes, we hear about other countries where there are war taking place. But I think a way forward for us today, at the end of the day, is we should show an example to the world that in our country, in your country, there is hope for us to live in peace. There is hope for us to peacefully coexist together with differences of religion, with differences of opinion. By all means, this is the creation and the signs of God. Are you going against the sign of God? وَمِنْ آيَاتِهِ خَلْقُ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ وَاخْتِلَافِ أَلْسِنَتِكُمْ وَأَلْوَانِكُمْ إِنَّ فِي ذَلِكَ لَآيَةٍ لِلْعَالِمِينَ. Of one of his signs that you see, there are creation of the earth and the heaven, and also the creation of many languages and colors. That includes religion, that includes race, tribes, ethnicity. Why? All this is a sign of God. لِلْعَالِمِينَ. For those who have brain to think, not for those who are brainless to kill others because you are different from me. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a big task for Malaysia. I have come up with a policy of what is derived from the spirit of Al-Quran. وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ إِلَّا رَحْمَةً لِلْعَالَمِينَ. We do not send you, O the Prophet of God, but to give peace and compassion to the whole entire universe. Against all form of hatred, extremism, radicalism, because these are the fragile points where those brainless people use to create hatred and war against one another. It is a huge task, I believe, yes. But nevertheless, because of our inspiring hope to see that the world can be filled with peace, and that is the message of humanity, we believe we can be the model, because Malaysia is so diverse. Unfortunately, politicians use this diversity for their own interests. I do not intend to do that when we come into power. I intend to get all Malaysians under one roof, being a Malaysian first, before telling you are a Chinese, or you are an Indian, or you are a Malay. Nevertheless, this hope will spur the hope to the whole world that this region, the ASEAN region, is still the region that can accept values of diversity. We can still accept the wave of different religion that comes into this region, but still we are intact. And for that, I do not tolerate any form of radicalism or extremism, because that will defeat the purpose of Rahmatan lil Alamin. And in order to do that, number one, the clarity is very important. Number two, it should translate into programs. And number three, I open up my hand to work with anyone. For that matter, we have made the first in its kind dinner with all the OIC ambassadors in order for us to share this vision, so that there is still hope that they can bring back, and we can learn also from them. And inshallah, we will also try to meet the European community countries. We'll try to meet the South American countries, because if we can share these values of compassion, then the whole world will again be at peace. Sekian, terima kasih. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi taala wabarakatuh.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mujahid. Actually, I was touched by the verse that was quoted by Dr. Mujahid just now from Surah Al-Ma'idah. وَمَنْ أَحْيَاءَ النَّاسِ فَكَأَنَّمَا أَحْيَاءَ النَّاسَ جَمِيعًا. Whoever saves a single soul, it is as if he has saved the entire mankind. Actually, that verse, or a similar meaning, was also in Deuteronomy. When I watched the movie, The Schindler's List, that was the first verse that was being printed on the movie screen. Whoever saves a single soul, it is as if he has saved the entire mankind. It was in Deuteronomy as well. So I believe that, it's a very important verse, and it's very important for us to basically to look beyond the divide of Sunni and Shiite. Now, the issue is that, Dr. Mujahid has mentioned a lot about this, but I think we have to put things into action. It is not enough for us to say that we have to look beyond Sunni and Shiite divides, but every Friday when we go for Friday prayer, then we hear the Khatib at the Mimbar would be vilifying Shiites. Every single khutbah of the second khutbah, especially in Selangor, the state of Selangor. I do not know about other states, not in Wilayah, of course, where I normally observe my Friday prayer at Istaq or at Putrajaya. But in Selangor, I was told that, in every second khutbah, they were vilifying the Shiites. So how do we get across this? I think it must start somewhere. And I believe, in the olden days, during the time of the Umayyads, they hated Ali, Imam Ali, or we call some Sunni Muslims call Khalifa Ali ibn Abi Talib, and his progeny, Hussein and others. They despise them very much. And, every khutbah, they vilified Imam Ali and his sons and grandsons. It was only after, when Umar ibn Abdul Aziz came to power, then he put a stop to it. He said, no more nonsense, okay? No more vilifying of Imam Ali and his sons and grandsons. And until today, for hundreds of years, we still remember Umar bin Abdul Aziz for doing that, for stopping the nonsense. And I believe for hundreds of years to come, people would remember Mujahid Yusuf Rawal for putting a stop to this kind of nonsense in this country. So before I open to the floor, I think I would like to invite the ambassador of Yemen to Malaysia, Dr. Adil Hamid, to give a short speech of 5 minutes. Thank you.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, alhamdulillah, salatu wassalam ala Rasulullah. First of all, I would like to thank the Stand With Yemen Coalition and all the organizers for inviting me and be generous with me to give me 5 minutes. I hope you start the count after thanks and after welcoming words. So really, I'm very happy to be here today. Not to see the tragic photos of our people suffering, but to see how our brothers and sisters in Malaysia are very concerned about the tragic situation going on in Yemen. So thank you so much for Malaysia. Thank you so much for this generous country who opened the hearts before the gates for Yemenis. But as the organizer being generous with me to give me 5 minutes, I hope that be generous also to open their hearts to me and to my words, because I think that and I believe that such an event carrying the title of Stand with Yemen, Yemen should be the priority in this event. And my advice, my sincere advice, that the organizers be more courage, more precise, more honest, more humanitarian, to change the title to Stand Against Saudi, because this is the real title of this event. And we highly appreciate to have I highly appreciate to have a political symposium, not a humanitarian symposium. And I'm ready to attend a political symposium against Saudi. I will attend that also. But to say it is a humanitarian symposium to stand with Yemen, while I'm hearing only against Saudi, I'm not here to defend Saudi, they can do themselves. But here, I'm very touched and hearted. I see it honestly. To see some people walking in our tears and pains just to attack politically another party. Really, I'm so sorry to say that. I'm very touched and hearted by that. We welcome every help from all our brothers, all our friends all around the world. Alhamdulillah, a lot of people talking about Yemen and they want to help. Our Malaysian brothers was one of the first agencies, Malaysia Global Peace, Malaysia Relief Agency. And I surprised them when they convinced me at my office to go by themselves, because I was worried about them to go there, very dangerous. But Alhamdulillah, they insisted and they went there and they did and still doing a very great job. So thankful for Malaysia Global Peace and thank you for Malaysia Relief Agency. And let me put my voice with Dr. Chandra. Really, I'm very thankful for him because he spoke about a very important thing. Do we went in depth to know what's going on in Yemen? No, we don't do that. Even the media, as he said, I like his words. Thank you so much, Doctor. Really, our Malaysian brothers, as well as a lot of people, they need to go more in depth to know the Yemeni situation. It's not just to show sympathy. We are welcoming that. I'm very thankful. But you have to go in depth. Are Yemenis, and Alhamdulillah, I am very happy when I appointed to Malaysia as an ambassador, not to any other country, because I love Malaysia. And I know that we have a long historical relationships. Our grandfathers, our father came to this land, to the South Asia, in order to, as traders, but they spread the word of Islam, not by sword, not by a single drop of blood, peacefully, by mercy, by values. And now, mashallah, hundreds of thousands, millions of people in this region of the world become Muslims, and they will go to Jannah, inshallah, because our fathers and grandfathers came to this land to spread the word of Allah peacefully and by mercy and values and morals. So do you think, my brothers and sisters, we in Yemen crazy enough to fight each other like this? Are we crazy that one Muslim saying Allahu Akbar, killing another one saying Allahu Akbar? I think the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, Al-imanu yamani wal-hikma yamaniya, the faith is Yaman and the wisdom is Yamani. So, are we wise enough to do this? Are we crazy enough to do this? No, we are not. And I like the way of His Excellency, the Minister, our dear brother. I like always to talk to him because he talks Arabic very nice. Dear Minister, I like the way you always refer to our supreme reference, the Quran. I like that, really. And we go with the same school. We are from the same school. But also in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وإن طائفتان من المؤمنين اقتتلوا فأصلحوا بينهما. If there are two groups of Muslims, of believers, fight each other, you have to bring them peacefully together. And we did that a long time. When we start our revolution in 2011, and let me say that this is not to defend Saudi Arabia. 2011, Yemen was near to the war status. But by the help of our brothers, Arab brothers, by Saudis especially, they make pressure on Ali Abdullah Saleh, our ex-president, Allah yarham, already killed by Houthis. They make pressure on him to come to the table and sign the Gulf initiatives, under which the Yemenis undergone 10 months of peaceful discussion. And we reached to the outcomes of the national Yemeni dialogue, which stated that Yemen will transfer to federal system. We solved the southern problem. We solved the Sa'da of al-Houthis problem. We solved a lot of historical problems. But suddenly happened what is going on. So for that, we complete the ayah in Quran. فَإِنْ بَقَتْ إِحْدَاهُمَا عَلَى الْأُخْرَى. No choice. Why we Yemenis, the wise, the faithful, those who are saying by the Prophet, go to war, went to war. It's not our choice. It's not easy. I was with the Minister of Foreign Affairs when our brother Fahmi, I don't know where is he, show us one photo from Mu'alla, Aden, my place. That means that woman, either my neighbor, maybe one day will be one of my family. Do you know that? Are you feel that I will be happy of that? But I asked them a question. Nobody is happy by seeing these photos. We are pleased from our inside, but no choice. When we found a group of people talking about the divine rights of rulers, the one Minister Mujahid talked about, we are against racism. When we found a group by force, they want to implement the divine rights of rulers in Yemen just because they have the holy blood in their body. But why we are like paper bags for them? Nobody can accept that. And we try peacefully. We went to Geneva 1, we went to Geneva 2, we went to Geneva 3, we went to Kuwait, peace talk. We went finally to Sweden, and here we have the ambassador of Sweden. And we were very happy with the outcomes of the Stockholm. But what happened? We're still facing the same group who tried to, by force, carrying weapons, attack city after city until they reached to the capital of Sana'a and tried to kill our elected president. We are very proud of the Malaysian experience of peacefully transfer of power. Very proud of that. But we have our elected president, our legitimate president. How we cannot stand with him? How we can just surrender him to them? They tried to kill him in Sana'a twice. They tried to kill him in Aden. After he managed to escape to Aden, they destroyed the presidential palace by air forces. Because of that, why Saudi intervened. And you know, I'm a live witness, because I was a governor that time of Hadramaut. Before I posted here in Malaysia, I was the governor of Hadramaut Governorate. And our president, after they tried to kill him in Aden twice by air strikes, he came to me in the 9th of 26th of March 2015, asked to stay with me in my palace, the governor palace. But you know what was my reply? Excellency, I'm so sorry, it's too late. Myself is surrounded now by the troops of Al-Houthi in the presidential palace. I cannot have you with me because already surrounded. So please go away. And we guided him safely to the Omani border. That night only started the Arab coalition operation in Yemen in 26th of March. So people who want to know the truth about what is going on in Yemen, they have to go beyond the Saudi intervention. If you are truth seekers, but people just stay and stand at that point. And if they want to go beyond that, they jump. The year 2015, the year 2014, they jump to the historical issues. No. Like that little girl, Bitiha. When they memorized her all this talk, to talk about President Al-Hamdi, myself was not born that time. To know about President Al-Hamdi, who is one of our best presidents, to talk about Al-Juf petrol, or oil. Really, I'm very sad to see that Betty girl memorizing these leaded questions given to her. I hope, last word, I already finished, alhamdulillah. So please, to stand with Yemen, there's a lot of ways. And we really thank Malaysia. There is, I'm sorry to quote, there is one Malaysian proverb. I just heard from one of my friends. I'm so sorry, my Malay Sikh is not that good. Kira di hutan disusukan, anak di rumah mati kelaparan. So, you can stand with Yemen by stand with Yemenis here in Malaysia, Excellency. We have around 17 to 18,000 Yemenis here in Malaysia. Most of them, they came here because of the situation. So instead of the translation, I think, instead to feed the monkey in the jungles while the kid at home is hungry. So you can do a lot of them. We just seek some relaxation of immigration, some relaxation for education and health, some relaxation for employment. Yemeni people, even we are having broken country today, but we stand with full of pride, full of dignity. We are not beggars. Yemenis are not beggars. They are hard workers. They can work for themselves. So, Excellency, thank you so much. Thank you for organizing. I'm so sorry. And please, maaf Zahra Dampatan, because I'm talking this way for only one reason. This is Yemen there. This is my country you are talking about. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. You exceeded 5 minutes of your time, so it's 10 minutes. So, yeah. And I think the lady is not here to defend herself. So it's very unfair to criticize her. But that's what's the feelings on the ground, I believe, in Yemen, and many of us felt the same to what was uttered by the lady just now. But anyway, because we do not have much time left, I think I'll open to the floor. We get 3 questions first. Yeah, Dr. Narima, you're the first. Yeah, Dr. Narima, and I get 3 questions first. You line up, and we open to the next one. Dr. Narima first. Dr. Narima first, please.
Thank you, Farouk. I would like to thank the panelists for such a lively session. I particularly want to thank Prof. Chandra Muzaffar and YB Mujahid for contextualizing it to Malaysia. And I'd like to just give two more points to what both of you have just said. What Prof. Chandra Muzaffar said, Malaysian Muslims are ignorant, they're unenthused, and they're not curious. I will add to that, they have been wrongly exposed, they have been exposed to the wrong teachings of Islam, where they think that Islam is Arabia, Islamization is Arabization. So anything to do with Saudi Arabia must be holy and good. They don't really care what the Saudis do because they are Saudi Arabians, because Mecca happens to be in Saudi Arabia. Secondly, what Farouk, you yourself have just said about sectarianism and the lack of curiosity is the wrong teaching of Islam and sectarianism, hating the Shia.
Thank you, Dr. Rama.
And maybe I should ask a question. So what is the new Pakatan Harapan government going to do to deal with these ignorant Malaysians? Maybe today is not the answer.